Good getting internet, and once more I am vlogging from my bedroom. I had such high plans for my vlog today. Not gonna happen. That's okay. Zone Kitty's in way more of my vlogs this year. Yeah. Because most of my vlogs are being recorded from my bedroom. So I don't disrupt everybody else around here because COVID. That's the reason why you're seeing it everywhere here, is because there's not really much of a time that the house is quiet. Yeah. So you may have noticed that I didn't upload a normal vlog yesterday. That's because I actually used one of my Let's Plays. I recorded them all yesterday. The entire game Vaxanadu got recorded yesterday, other than the first episode. So, oh, now you're settling down, kitty cat? So I had plans for today, 3 separate sets of plans, and none of them have happened. I'm hoping that I can do my label series tomorrow, because I really want to do more of those, but they take a lot out of me, and I needed a break today. I had also planned on maybe doing a VR video today, covering my VR setup downstairs along with a silly tale. That didn't happen because I didn't really have access to my desktop computer for most of the day. So, yeah. Let's see, my day today consisted of me farting around with Tabletop Simulator and playing games with friends of mine in Indiana. Then watching my partner play Skyrim. That's it. That's all I did today. So one thing that did come up yesterday is that I didn't realize what day of the month it was. And that was my mistake, because yesterday was the anniversary of my father's death. So I suppose I could talk with you all about my father. I know I talked a little bit about him, but I've never actually gone into much detail like I did my mother last week. So, for those of you that are newer to my vlogs, my father passed away April 18th, 2013, due to a heart attack. Second heart attack, actually. And it was, as much as I don't like blaming the dead for things, it was his fault. Sort of. I wouldn't necessarily say that he died of a heart attack. I mean, that's literally what killed him, but more that he died from depression. Turns out that's probably where my clinical depression comes from, is my father. He had been depressed for a long time, and really for good reason from his perspective. His life was over? Question mark? So let me backtrack and explain. So, my father is where I got my love of computers from. And he had... My first job was at the same company that he was working at for a long period of time. An antivirus company that was based in Jupiter, Florida. And he was offered a new job at a... I guess that would be an aircraft engine assembly company, working IT things. He was given the job offer. He gave his notice at the antivirus place, which had been starting to have some issues with staffing. They had merged with another company. Their company had a QA team of like 7. The other company didn't bother with a QA team, so as a result of the merger, they laid off half the QA team. So that makes sense. So things had not been going so great at the QA team that he had been working with, and he had this new job offer. So he accepted the new job offer, and they never actually gave him the job. So he had walked away from his job with no chance of being rehired, and that was it. That was the last time that he had a tech industry job. That got to him quite a bit. He eventually found work working for a hotel. I actually don't know too many details about this because this was after I was in college. He worked at the front desk of a hotel, and one day going into work had a panic attack, a severe panic attack, due to, I think it was a near miss of a car accident. Again, this is while I've been living, well, that part was while I was living in Indiana. I think that happened shortly after I graduated. I don't remember exact timelines anymore. Had a panic attack and couldn't come in. His anxiety was, well, in hindsight, very familiar to me. At the time, not something I was familiar with. And he eventually was let go because he wasn't making it to work. After a long time of job hunting, he finally got a job with Comcast. This happened while I've been living in Madison. So that would have been 2009, I think. Unfortunately, it wasn't with Comcast's tech support. It was actually with Comcast sales support. And my father doesn't do sales very well. Specifically, he was in retentions, which is a sales sector for Comcast. This is not his forte, to put it mildly. My father wasn't a very forceful person to most people. And he was eventually let go from that. And by that point, he gave up. My father had gone through more jobs than I went through houses that I lived in. He would eventually walk away from a job. And in hindsight, I know what's going on with that. And I really wish I would have noticed this while he was still alive. This is the same type of thing that I go through. Not that I've been walking away from jobs. I've literally only left one job because I couldn't deal with things anymore. But it's stress. My father did not react to stress very well. The antivirus place was a very obvious example. His method of dealing with being under too high stress was raising his voice, yelling and screaming and punching random objects. I have some drama from that because what he would yell at wasn't necessarily what was causing him stress. It was just whatever happened to have been in the moment, and sometimes that was me as a kid. Yeah. He wasn't really the type of person to apologize for something like that either. I'm sure that he realized what was going on. And after reading some of his writing after he died, he was a lot more introspective. More like the way I am, but an introvert instead of an extrovert. He didn't really confide in too many people. His best friend was my mother. And my mother didn't really like him too much after a while. Not really hatred, more we prefer to have him as an acquaintance rather than calling him a friend. And my father would get on her nerves quite often and easily. So he had one other friend in the world, basically. Both my mother and him have the same friend. That's actually how they originally met, way back in the early 80s. And that was it. My father would frequently go over to his parents' place, which was across the street, because he lived in an apartment that my grandparents owned. And he would come by and say hi. He would help take care of them. Those parts are perfectly fine. In exchange, my grandparents basically helped him out with food, groceries, etc. Because you live in the United States and you don't have a job, you don't have income at all. Unemployment had long since ran out. He was just about to get approved for Social Security when he passed away. Like, as in, I think the approval letter had already arrived, and he was just within the waiting period of actually having benefits start for early retirement. So, yeah. He was not in a very good place mentally. About the best thing that he had going for him was the fact that I was going to ask him. I had talked to him about it ahead of time, and I was going to ask him to run the networking wire in this house. That's the reason why I took a while to actually do it myself, or paid somebody to do it, I should say, because it was supposed to be a father-son project here. And I'm not a handy person. He's also not really a handy person, but he was handier than I was. He can at least do cable running and so on. That was in his areas of expertise. But, yeah. So, the reason why I say that he's basically killed himself is that when he had his first heart attack, it would have been about 9 months before he died. And he was told by his doctors straight out, part of your heart died, and it's from smoking. If you don't stop smoking now, you will die within a year. And he did not try. He had tried several times to stop smoking in the past. He was actually more successful on that than my mother, even though his willpower was generally lower. And the fact that he didn't try kind of clued me into what was going on even then. Yeah. My father was a good person, but he had a lot of problems and a lot of things that, well, as I mentioned in the video with my mother, I was more attached to my mother than my father. And the reason for that is that I learned things from my father, mostly not to do for situations and so on. My diplomatic abilities and capabilities of engaging with other people do not come from my father. They don't really come from my mother either. They're more me reacting to both of them and learning what not to do, and some things what to do. My father was not really a people person, which made him, when he became my second supervisor ever, that was terrible. He should have never, he got Peter Principled into a supervisory position. He should have never been outside of a tech. This is not an area that he's good at. He can't tell people what to do. He can try, and everybody will walk all over him. He was also really bad with money. I had figured out long ago if that I wanted something from him to ask it right after payday and to not feel bad about it because it would get spent either way. And I really didn't even know what he spent his money on. Still couldn't figure it out. Obviously, when he was unemployed, that's a different story. But when he was employed, he was getting paid at the time from the antivirus place a decent wage. Not anything super high, but, more than enough to live off of given how much he was paying in rent and utilities and so on. But he would be broke before payday every week, or every other week, or every month, depending on his pay period. And no matter what, it always happened. Didn't matter how much he got paid, he would never be able to save. He also recognized that he wouldn't be able to save, so he intentionally increased his tax withholding. That way he would have a bigger tax refund, which is effectively giving the IRS an interest-free loan on your own money. Which doesn't make any sense logically. And he actually had a decent brain for mathematics too. So I know he knew what he was doing. I think he just had really bad impulse control. Which, to be fair, so did my mother, and so do I. I just proactively stopped myself from doing things rather than anything else. Like for instance, the fact that my father liked drugs. He liked drugs prior to my birth. To the best of my knowledge, he never really did outside of... my mother mentioned a couple of incidents within about a year of my birth. But as in within a year, within my birth to a year old, where he had taken some drugs. And by drugs, I don't mean weed. I mean harder drugs. He liked amphetamines. But he hadn't touched those since then. As much as my grandparents kept thinking that he had. There's a reasonable chance he probably smoked some weed sometime while I've been alive, beyond the first year, but never any sign of it while I've been alive. And while I've been cognizant of what's going on. I mean, I've been able to recognize those smells since I was 12 or 13. So definitely no time after between then and when I left Florida. He helped people. One of my fondest memories of my father was, my father had created a consulting company. Computer Consulting was the name of it. He was trying to work for himself as a side job to get more money. And I remember a couple of places that he would go to that turns out he wasn't getting paid for. The reason why he wasn't getting paid for is that he would take things in exchange, usually. One of those was he wanted me to experience what a CD-ROM game was like and allowed me to play Myst and Seventh Guest on somebody's computer. And that was the payment that he received in exchange for fixing insert computer problem here. Or another place where he just volunteered to do it. Am I covering up the light sensor? Yes, I was. He just volunteered entirely. And the reason why is that the person that he was trying to help had MS and couldn't do some of the things that was required to fix his computer. So my dad just did it. No payment, no exchange, nothing. The only exchange that we had was that he would talk to me about it. I was there with him. I went to a lot of his computer repair things because I was his son. And he was very, very proud of me. Holy crap, was he proud of me. It became a running thing that whenever I met somebody that my father knew, the very first thing that would come out of their mouth would be, "You're the kid I've heard all about." And initially I kind of just thought, okay, maybe that's just the type of thing that adults say. Whatever. But I've actually heard him do this. Especially when I was working at the antivirus place. I was talked up quite a bit, put on a very high pedestal, to put it mildly. Strangely enough, I really was that good at a lot of things that he was talking me up about. But, yeah. He had told me that his proudest day was the day that I graduated from college. Because that was something he couldn't do. My father actually did go to college. From what he said, he lasted one semester before dropping out. My father was in the Navy. So, backtrack some. My father graduated from high school in 1969. Males in the United States graduating from high school in 1969 meant the draft and Vietnam. My father saw that and went, how about I volunteer instead of getting drafted? So he volunteered to go into the Navy, and as a result, he stayed the hell away from Vietnam, for the most part. He actually served on the same vessel that, for those that are in the U.S., John McCain, when he was a Navy pilot, took off from and got shot down over Vietnam. My father was a sailor on that boat. Not at the same time. There was a couple of years difference. But it was the USS Forrestal. It was a nuclear-powered submarine. Not submarine. Nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. That had this tendency to catch fire constantly. Yeah, my father had a lot of fire training as a result. But the Forrestal was the ship that the Navy used to sail around the world as on a goodwill tour type of thing, rather than seeing a bunch of combat at the time that my father was on it. That's probably because of all the things that happened prior, including John McCain getting shot down and so on. So my father saw the world at that point. Saw the world and experienced a lot of drugs. But after his tour of duty, he tried to enroll in college, and that wasn't for him, apparently. Strangely enough, I actually don't know much about my father's education prior to then, other than my father did graduate from high school in a normal amount of time. My mother was technically the high school dropout. But he was extremely proud of me. He was proud of me for a lot of things, especially anything academic or computer related. I could really use somebody proud of me. I miss you, Dad. The last time I saw my father would have been the last time I visited Florida. That would have been February of 2013, so a few months before he died. And he had a dramatic change. He looked like he aged 30 years overnight. Well, not overnight, because I didn't see him the previous year, but he aged 30 years basically between his heart attacks. His hair was white. I mean, it had been starting to get gray for a while, but this went straight to white. Probably because right of his heart died. He still behaved mostly the same, but it almost felt like he was pretending to behave the same way, rather than actually being the same person. From what I had heard, he was getting tired more easily, which, again, just had a heart attack. That makes sense. Yeah. Some of the things that helped me get through some of my really darker times, depression-wise, is the fact that I know that my father would be proud of me, pretty much no matter what I do. My mom would also be proud of me, but for some reason it means more. Even though my father's always been proud of me, always bragging about me, always loved me. But my mother, same. She's always been proud of me. And she's said so many times. But there's something different about the way my father was proud of me. It's kind of like he looked at me and went, see what I can do? I'm not a complete screw-up after all. After all, my son is awesome. And while I don't really believe him most of the time, I believed that he meant it. I guess that's important to me. I should get some sleep, Internet. Also, previously mentioned, this is a Dungeons and Cats shirt. I told you, Candace, I do have multiple D&D and cat-related t-shirts. Bye, Internet. I'll talk to you next time.